Hello, I'm Anthony Renteria, and this is A Lonely Critic, and I'm a critic because I'm lonely. So today I just finished watching Watchmen, the movie, which is an adaptation of Watchmen, the graphic novel, that is directed by Zack Snyder, and the basic plot synopsis is the Watchmen are a disbanded old group of superheroes who, during this time of Cold War between the United States and Russia, a murder mystery unravels. It's an interesting graphic novel. I think if you should check out my review of the actual graphic novel on Comic Verm. So I'm actually reviewing it because of Comic Verm, because I thought it would be a cool idea to do an adaptation reaction. So if you've read the comic or you're interested in how this film portrays or adapts the comic specifically, like in that regard, go check that out. There'll be links below for that podcast. So that's the basic plot synopsis. And again, I'm going to remain spoiler free for the movie and kind of the comic as well, because this movie is very faithful to the comic. So if you haven't seen the movie, you haven't read the comic, I'm not going to spoil anything in this review. Alright, so what did I think of Watchmen, the film, directed by Zack Snyder? So, I have seen this film before. I watched it when it first came out in theaters. Man, I don't even remember what year this movie came out. Yeah, so this movie came out in 2009. So I would have watched this film when I was 18. And I remember when I watched this film in theaters, it had a huge impact on me. I think this was probably the first superhero film that I actually really loved. I remember I watched it with my brother. We all watched it together because my brother was going off to serve some time in Iraq, I think, in the Middle East. I hadn't really enjoyed a superhero film as much as this film when I watched it. It had a huge impact on me. And then because of the things going on in my personal life with him leaving and the fear I think anyone has and would have, if someone you care about or love is going, to a place and you're not sure if they may come back, So I think a lot of that had to do with my screening of the film, because the film, based on the comic, it's a very political story of how governments and society and humanity as a whole kind of self-destruct. And I think in my 18-year-old brain, sitting beside my brother who's about to leave for a war, and me and my paranoia and fear, anyone that knows me, or that knows me well, maybe one or two people, I have a deep anxiety of, I constantly think of the worst thing that could happen. So if someone's like, hey, can I borrow your car? I'm gonna go to the gas station. My first thought is oh, they're gonna die in a car accident. The gas station's gonna explode. All the time. Ever since I was little, that's always been this weird paranoid anxiety that I have. It's consistently imagining the worst imaginable situation. So obviously, when my brother was being deployed to Iraq, my first thought was oh, he's gonna die. How am I gonna deal with that? And probably wouldn't have dealt with that at all. I probably wouldn't even be here if that happened. So watching a film, Watchmen, at that time, dealing with subject matter that is kind of relevant, I remember it had a huge impact on me, and I was stunned. I was oh my god, we're fucked. As a human species, it's fucked, as governments that kind of use us as little puppets and pawns in this giant chess game that no one really cares about. No one really cares about anything. Humanity's fucked. Just constant negativity. And I remember I was just shell-shocked from the film. My mind was just spiraling. But it was a good experience because it made me think about things I had never thought of that age. I was in elementary school when 9/11 happened, so I didn't really think about it at that time. I didn't really think about war or anything really. So in a weird way, this film really brought me down to a level to where I thought about it. And I don't know if that's a testament to the film or the subject matter that it's based on, the comic. And now having read the comic, I feel a lot of things I love about this film come from the comic, obviously, because it is a pretty faithful adaptation. So that's just some ramble about, how I originally viewed the film. But now, my rewatch, it's very interesting because I haven't seen the film since that initial viewing, which had a huge impact. I think if at the time if I had to give it a rating, I would have gave it a 10 out of 10. That's how big of an impact it had on me at that time. And I think that was also before I really fell in love with cinema. So at that time I was watching films in the way that I think 99 0.9% of people watch films, which is like entertainment factor and just a pure, enjoyment level of like what if you just had a good time. I didn't really understand like the mechanics of filmmaking. I didn't understand the like process or the technicalities of filmmaking. So now that I have learned a lot and I have experienced a lot in filmmaking and in my experience and dissection of it, obviously my opinions have changed. But I still think this is a good movie. So now, my immediate reactions after this movie, I was surprised how well it held up. Because I was thinking this film was going to be bad. I think everyone right now is on this, like, I don't want to say like there is two camps. Just like a lot of things in our current society and world, there's two sides. There's the Zack Snyder lovers, and then the Zack Snyder haters. And like, I get why people dislike Zack Snyder. Because he has how do I word this? He has a distinctive voice, and I think that distinct voice rubs a lot of people the wrong way. I know on YouTube I stumbled upon like if Zack Snyder had directed like Spider-Man 2, or if like Zack Snyder had directed Iron Man, or if Zack Snyder had directed, whatever other superhero film, and they just have like an action sequence and they just like slow it down in certain parts. And play like songs. As you can tell, I've had a good time watching those. Like, it's just funny. I think it's funny. I think if I was Zack Snyder, I would watch those and laugh. So I think that's awesome. But he has a distinct visual eye, and I think inherently that is a good thing. Even if it's a bad thing, it's a good thing. I have a written review of Mission Impossible 2 that was directed by John Woo. And I had never seen a John Woo film. And people were like, this film is too much. You should go check out my review. It's on alonelywriter.com. I'll put a link to it because I think it's one of my best reviews. But anyways, that film was, and I remember I drank like 3 or 4 beers before I watched the movie. Cause alright, I need to be somewhat intoxicated for this experience, because from what I've heard, that film was a trip. I did that, and the film was a trip, and it was just completely insane. There was doves flying, there was just slow motion everywhere, and nothing really made sense. But it was a great time. I think Zack Snyder kind of fills that role for me, where I can see his flaws and his faults, but I still have a good time. Like, I think there is inherently something good about someone being distinct and unique. I think that is, I would rather have a unique bad take than a generic good take. I think if you watch my Eternals review, which I don't think I did a good job on on the actual review, I think that film is kind of the opposite. I think the MCU is like the complete opposite of Zack Snyder and what he was trying to do with the DC films. And I think this is his first superhero film, so it's an interesting peek into what that future would hold. And I think I appreciate this more than I appreciate the MCU, even though I think the MCU has better moments and has better films and like higher highs, but I think I just value a unique voice, and I think Zack Snyder is a unique voice. Like, hate him or love him, he has an eye, and I think that is so rare. I think that is so beyond rare that it's insanity that anyone can deny him that he has an eye. It'd be like saying like, alright, I'm gonna call Zack Snyder an auteur. Here comes the hate. And I don't think being an auteur inherently means you have objective or subjective quality to your work. I just think it means you are a very precise visionary filmmaker. And I think there can be horrible auteurs and bad auteurs, but no, I don't think neither camp should deny the fact that he has a unique visual taste, and he accomplishes that. So I think this film, Watchmen, I keep doing this where I pre-ramble before I even start talking about the film. So let's get into the actual film. So with all that being said, what I thought about this time, immediate reactions, immediate review, I think I had a good time. I really liked a lot of the stuff. Having come off the comic, this is my first time reading a comic and then watching a film adaptation. So this is probably like the first experience that I can relate to with people who, have been like comic lovers their whole life, or like, I read Batman and then now I watch Batman, or more specifically like maybe a more obscure character, like let's say I was the biggest fan of Captain Marvel, and then the Captain Marvel film came out. It was something I imagined or something I didn't imagine. So this is my first experience with that in that lens, and it was exciting. Like there was like little Easter eggs that I noticed, which is, I don't know, it was like a mind-blowing experience. Like, I don't think anyone who hasn't read the source material can have the feeling of watching something that it's based on and having that, like, oh, like that, and there is something crazy that I just realized now that I've never experienced that before. Like, I've never known that feeling. So having that feeling now, it was pretty awesome. Like, there was a lot of moments where I was like, oh, that's from the graphic novel. That's from the graphic novel. Oh, why did he put that there? That was just like a nice little Easter egg. So you can tell off the bat that Zack Snyder loves this graphic novel, I think. I know he, this was very early on in his career. This is like right after the 300 film that he made. So I think at this time he was very faithful to his adaptations. And I think I read an interview where he was talking about, he uses the source material, the comics, and as a storyboard, and you can really tell, like, a lot of these shots come straight out of the graphic novel. And as someone who loved that graphic novel, I'm like, yeah, that's the way to do it. That's a way to do it, and that's the way to do it. And I think he pulled it off. I think this film captures a lot of the great things about the graphic novel, in my opinion. I think it's a great adaptation. It skims a lot of stuff off, and it cuts a lot of things off, and it changes. No spoilers. I guess if you've read the comic, well, you won't know. No spoilers, but the ending is different than what the comic, how the graphic novel ended. And I mean, obviously the graphic novel's ending is way better. I think it's an interesting idea what he did here. I remember when I first watched it in the theater, I was like, oh my god, that's genius. And then I read the graphic novel and I was like, oh my god, that's even more genius. So this is definitely not as good as the graphic novel's ending, in my opinion. I mean, it makes sense and it works. And for some reason, I was watching some like backstory about all the Watchmen adaptations that have like tried to happen over time, and one of them was saying that there was some rights issue to where they couldn't do the exact graphic novel adaptation because of some licensing or something for like the Twilight Zone. I don't know. Someone comment below if that's accurate or not. But someone said that there was some legal reason why they couldn't do the actual comic ending. I liked a lot about this film. I think it does have a lot of flaws, though. Towards the end, from the middle to the end of the film, it really picks up pace in like a not good way, in my opinion. Like, it really starts, snapping to scene to scene to scene. I think the graphic novel is just too big of a story, and there's just too many characters, and there's too much, like, if you've read the graphic novel, there's a lot of moments in the graphic novel that are, they're kind of like multimedia kind of an experience where it snaps from a graphic novel to a comic within the graphic novel to a memoir within the graphic novel to a news clipping within the graphic novel. And there's a lot of like a story within a story within a story type of element. And I don't think the film does any of that. Like, it just scraps all that out, which I think was a smart move and a smart idea because it's just too large of a text to adapt. But I think in doing that, it does lose a lot of the voice of the original graphic novel. And then it also cuts a bunch of scenes out. Can't really talk about the specifics of the scene because that'd be spoiler for the graphic novel. But I think it cuts certain moments short and certain moments oddly to where it doesn't... The film is still good. I'm not saying the film is bad. I think it's a good film. There's something about the weight of it that didn't hit me the way the comic and the graphic novel did. And when I finished reading the graphic novel, it was like a brick was like 100-pound brick was on my chest. I felt this like existential dread of like, like, what are we doing? Like, what are we as a species doing? Like, what's the point? And just a lot of questions. And I love that. I think that's the most beautiful part about that graphic novel is the questioning of, it makes, like, if you really stop to think about things, it makes you question stuff. And I think the film, I don't know if there's some like interstitial tissue or there's moments that are just sped up or they were just cut too short or it was too slim in the emotional department where the film never felt like that. At the end of the film, I don't feel like a brick is laying on my chest. And I think a lot of that maybe is the ending. The ending doesn't have the wow factor that the graphic novel did. And, when I was reading the graphic novel, getting to the end, I remember flipping from page to page thinking like, oh my god, like, oh my god, oh god, having like a visceral reaction, and it was insane because that's the first comic that made me feel that, and it was amazing. And the movie definitely doesn't have that feeling. It doesn't even come close. It doesn't come close to the emotional reactions that I had reading the comic, but that's okay. I still think it's a good movie. I think it's a good adaptation, to be honest. Like, I think it covers most of the ground. It doesn't hit the emotional cues, and I think that is probably just a restriction of time. The film is about like 2 hours and 45 minutes, 2 hours and 49 minutes. It's a very long film. And I think to do this graphic novel justice, like the actual Watchmen text, you would minimum need 3 hours. I mean, honestly, at least 3 hours, maybe 3.5 hours, maybe 4 hours. I don't know. But, I think this is good enough, and I think this is better than what we normally get with most adaptations or stories based on comics. And I think it was a great time. I think if you're a Zack Snyder fan, and if you've seen like 300 or his Batman v Superman or Justice League or any of the other things he worked on, Man of Steel, I think you'll have a great time with this. Like the visuals are stunning at times, and it's crazy because it's from 2009. I really thought a lot of the CGI and the effects wouldn't hold up. I mean, there's some specific things that I don't think hold up very well. The pet that Ozymandias has, I don't think it looks very well nowadays, but I mean, that's very minor. One thing that I was so shocked by is Dr. Manhattan. Dr. Manhattan's look in this film, I thought it was spectacular. Like I don't know how they did the effect specifically, but it's something I want to go back and look at the behind the scenes to like see exactly how they pulled it off, because I love the texture that they capture on his like face, and he has like, just has the like skin texture that you would imagine a human to have, but then still keep the bright blue light that he's like radiating. And that brings me to another thing that I really liked about this film was the performances. I think all the actors did such a great job, performing as their characters, and they all feel like the characters from the comic. Specifically Dr. Manhattan, I think his performance is my favorite of all of them, which is saying a lot because I think Rorschach is like right. Here's Dr. Manhattan. Here's Rorschach. I don't know why I closed that. I don't know, I just love seeing Dr. Manhattan and his just simple. It was like such a minimal performance, like his like when he talked, he would be like, "Yes, I don't know." I'm overacting. See, and that's what's so difficult is that he's like barely moving his lips, and it's like no reaction. But then you can tell like little twitches in certain scenes when he's saying things, and you're like, "Oh my god, he's feeling so much." But he's like a being that doesn't really feel the way how a normal human feels, because the way he perceives time. And I found that beautiful. I thought that was a beautiful performance, perfect acting, perfect casting of Dr. Manhattan, perfect visuals. I think the other performer that did really good is Rorschach. Dr. Manhattan is played by Billy Crudup, and then Jackie Earle Haley was Rorschach in the film. And I think his performance was also spectacular. Rorschach quickly in the comic became, again, I'm only 2 comics in my comic journey, but Rorschach is like bar none my favorite character, just with how he thinks and deals with the idea of being a superhero and like dealing with crime. I haven't read anything from Punisher or the Batman yet, but he seems to fit kind of that same similar character of like, criminals deserve a certain amount of punishment, certain level of punishment, people who kill other people, and the savage acts of violence or what have you. And then there's that like dilemma of like, what do you do, like what's right. And I think Rorschach fits in an interesting, super dark mold of a character that deals with that, and I'm fascinated with it, like someone who is on the darkest side of that spectrum, where Batman's on like the lightest side, and his struggle is that he can't kill anyone. And then you have the Punisher, who I think is, I haven't read the Punisher, so I don't know, but I assume the Punisher is also on the darker side, if not the darkest side, where he is just brutal, like a brutal machine of punishment, And I think Rorschach fills that character. Him being the first character that I've read, that fits that role. It's very intriguing to me, and it's like a dynamic that I don't know, it's just like intriguing. But so I think his performance was amazing. The other thing I wanted to mention was the cinematography. I think the cinematography in this film I thought visually it was amazing. There are some moments, like I said, some CGI stuff, and there are some other visual components that I think aren't very good, like to today's standards. Like I think they've just aged badly. And then the other flaw I have visually is I don't really like their new costumes. I might be wrong, but I think Night Owl and Silk Spectre and Ozymandias, I think their costumes don't look exactly how they look in the comic. Which is interesting because all the older, when they're doing the flashbacks to the Minutemen and all the older costume heroes, all their costumes look just perfect, like immaculate. Based on the comic, where the newer ones, for some reason, I don't know, they felt kind of off to me. And I don't have the comic in front of me. I have my friend Jeffrey Carroll was borrowing it. They don't look right, and I think that's a little complaint that I have. But yeah, the cinematography, I thought it was beautiful. Like I again, I think Zack Snyder has his own visual aesthetic. And if you don't like that aesthetic, then you just won't like the aesthetic, because it's the same in all his films. Like, he has his visual stamp, but I am a fan of his visual stamp. I like the slow motion punch and slow motion kicks and then the bone snapping, and I like the, I don't know, there's something about that action that I really enjoy. I enjoy it more, honestly. I enjoy his action in this film and his action in all his superhero films. This is going to be controversial. I've enjoyed that action more than I've enjoyed the action in any other Marvel film or any other superhero film, because it feels unique. It feels different. There was I watched this YouTube video about someone dissecting the action scenes in MCU films and how their fight scenes kind of seem lackluster. It was specifically talking about, what film was it? I think it was Guardians of the Galaxy. It was specifically talking about that film, and it was just this fight scene that happened there. Now I think the only directors that have done action to a T for the MCU films is the Russo brothers. Infinity War, Endgame, Winter Soldier, Civil War. The way they use powers and bounce powers off of each other, dynamic of that, they are the exception in my mind. Also, Taika Waititi in Thor Ragnarok, I think there's some moments of beauty in that action, but other than those, so far, I don't know. I think Zack Snyder does a great job filming action. I'm sorry. I just think it looks nice on screen. I feel the impacts. It excites me. I think it looks awesome. So yeah, and then just the general cinematography of the whole film looks beautiful to me. I love, the dark shadows. I love how he plays with light. And I know now it's a shtick, you see it and you're like, oh my god, that's Zack Snyder. It's washed out, it's gray, there's no colors. All the complaints. But again, I think I'd say the same complaints for the MCU. All their color palettes look exactly the same, and they feel almost like TV aesthetics. And if you know anything about me, or if you've heard my Cineverse podcast, then I hate TV aesthetics more than anything in the world. And I think Zack Snyder somehow fits, his images look very digital, but they look like they're almost trying to imitate film in a way. I noticed a lot of grain in this film. There's a lot of grain in 300. There's something about him that has some sort of texture, where all the MCU films, and that even with the Russos, I think all the MCU films, just visually, texture and aesthetic wise, they are just unpleasing to me. Just 1,000,000%. The closest pleasing aesthetic that I've seen from the MCU is probably again, Taika Waititi from Thor Ragnarok. That's probably the pinnacle so far, and that is a very low pinnacle. A very, very, very low. I think that's something that I still struggle to figure out why. Why? Is that something Kevin Feige does? Is that something the studio does? Do they have requirements of what cameras to use? Do they have the same color grading person? Do they have the same something's going on to where they all look the same? I don't know. There's something going on over there. But so I like the dark moodiness. I like the slow motion action. I like the shadows. I like the light. I like the way it pops on screen, and I think it's beautiful. I like the moments of Zack Snyder putting in slow motion to a song. The way the intro plays. There's a scene where we kind of see the older Watchmen in a montage. That was awesome to me. I watched that and I was like, dude, that's fucking sick. that is sick. And it filled me with joy because having read the comic, I'm like, oh, I get to see all the like iterations that the comic talks about. And it was amazing to me. I love the snapshots. Like, I think he, in a way, he is probably like, if he really wanted to just make music videos, he'd be the best music video director of all time. Bar none, he would just take over the entire industry. Because he has, like, I think that's his greatest strength, is his visual aesthetic. I think in a weird way, and I don't mean this as a diss, but I think he would have made like a phenomenal cinematographer, like just phenomenal, because I think that's his greatest strength. I think his greatest weakness is, and I think it's the greatest weakness of any director who doesn't write their own scripts, is like, you know, you're beholden to your script, and also how you extract performances. I don't really have a complaint about that. I know there's that whole meme with like Martha in Batman v Superman, and you know, I think Zack Snyder does have a sense of melodrama to him, but I think in this adaptation it works because the graphic novel is such a dry text. It's very dry in the way it plays emotions. So I think in a way, the way he adapts it to kind of like push the melodrama, I think it works here. Like again, no spoilers, but in the ending they change the way they deal with one character's outcome. I'll say that. And in the comic, it's just like a 1 second, you know, just panel, it happens, panel, it's done. And I love it how in this film, you know, Zack Snyder had the emotional thought to explore that moment further, even if it's just, you know, a scream or a yell. I appreciated that a lot. You know, I felt that way more than I did with the comic, because it was cool seeing another character react to something I was reacting to. So I think that was a good choice. You know, there's a lot of choices here that he makes that I think are interesting, and I appreciate that. You know, like with an adaptation, I can see his mind working on like, all right, I do this, I do that, cut this out, put this in, you know, kind of change this a little bit. And that's awesome, because most adaptations that I've watched or that I've seen, you know, they feel just completely deductive and like subtractive, and I'm like, why did you even do this if you're just eliminating everything? And I think this film keeps enough of the source material to where I'm satisfied, and I think most people could watch it if you love the comic and you'd be like, all right, you know, it was good. And some people will love it, but I don't think anyone who loved the comic would hate it outright. I don't think it does anything horribly wrong or does a disservice to anything. But yeah, so that's just my general impressions and review. If you're interested more into how I break this down, you know, judging against the comic, I'm going to be doing a Comic Verm episode. That's why I watched the film. So check that out. That'll be in the link below. I'm doing that review with my friend Jeffrey Carroll. So that's going to be exciting. Check that out. That should be a longer discussion, and I'll get into the nitty gritty. If you haven't read the comic or watched the movie, maybe don't watch that, because that's going to be full spoilers, just dissecting it. But yeah, so, and then if you're interested in reading the comic, go check out our Comic Verm review episode of the actual comic. We have a spoiler-free section, so you can learn more about just if you think you'd enjoy it. And then we have a spoiler section, but we, you know, give you a heads up on when that happens. And then the other things I have is I have a Cineverm film podcast. So if you want to check that out, that's where I review some more artsy indie films. And then I have that's all I have. And then speaking about Comic Verm, you can check out my friend Jeffrey Carroll's podcast, the Back Bedroom Podcast, where he talks about all things fun, geek culture, gaming, comics, movies, all kinds of stuff. So check that out. But yeah, I think that does it with this review. Oh, the rating. So I don't know. I think for sure I'd give this film a 7 out of 10 for now. I think it's a good film. I kind of want to give it an 8. Like, I think it's kind of great, but right now I'm gonna stay on a 7. I think it's really good. And I think it's worth a watch, and I had a good time. I'll have a written review of this, then that'll be like my official, you know, final statement and thoughts on it, and that should be out, and probably around when this comes out or a couple days after, and that'll be my definitive rating. But so be on the lookout for that to see if I bump it up to an 8. But right now it's a 7 out of 10. I think it's worth a watch. If you're a Zack Snyder fan, you definitely have to watch it, like without a doubt. You know, I think it's one of his better films. If you're a fan of the comic, you should watch it. If you're interested in the comic, you know, the fact that it changes the ending from the graphic novel, I think that actually makes it to where you can still enjoy the graphic novel for some reason. Like, I still enjoy the graphic novel because it had so much more material, and then the ending was different, and I knew the ending was different because everyone talked about how it was different. I didn't know where the comic was going, so it still felt fresh. And so that's actually something I want to think of, like when I do adaptations of my own work, like maybe changing the ending is the best idea, because then you can watch a movie about it and then enjoy the text. I don't know. I'll think about that. But yeah, thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.